When 17-year-old Madison Whitmore smirked at the wheelchair-bound veteran she'd mocked and assaulted, she had no idea Judge Elias Monroe was about to erase that smile forever. If you believe justice should be blind to wealth and privilege, hit that like button right now. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Courtroom 7, casting long shadows across the polished oak benches. The air hung heavy with tension, thick enough to taste. Judge Elias Monroe sat elevated behind his bench, his weathered face carved from years of witnessing humanity's worst and occasionally its best. His gray eyes, sharp as surgical steel, surveyed the courtroom with the patient intensity of a man who had seen every variation of human arrogance and knew exactly how each would crumble. At the defendant's table sat Madison Whitmore, her designer dress probably worth more than most people in the room earned in a month. Her honey-blonde hair fell in perfect waves across her shoulders, her manicured nails tapping an impatient rhythm against the mahogany table. She looked bored, as if this entire proceeding was beneath her, an inconvenient interruption to her social calendar. Her father, Preston Whitmore III, sat beside her, a man whose tailored suit and platinum cufflinks announced his wealth before he ever opened his mouth. His law firm had sent their best attorney, Marcus Thornhill, a silver-haired shark who smiled like he'd already won. Across the aisle sat the victim, Sergeant First Class Robert Chen, United States Army, retired. His wheelchair was positioned at an angle that allowed him to face the defendant's table directly. The left leg of his pants hung empty, pinned neatly above where his knee should have been. His right hand, scarred from burns that had also left marks climbing his neck, rested on the armrest. His face remained expressionless, but his eyes, those eyes had seen things that Madison Whitmore, in her 17 years of privilege, couldn't begin to imagine. His attorney, Sarah Mendez, a public defender with a worn briefcase and fire in her belly, stood ready. She knew this case mattered. She knew that in this room, right now, the scales of justice would either balance or break. Judge Monroe's gavel came down once, a sharp crack that silenced the whispers rippling through the gallery. This court is now in session. The people versus Madison Whitmore. Miss Whitmore, you are charged with assault and battery, harassment, and disability discrimination. How do you plead? Marcus Thornhill rose smoothly, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty to all charges. Furthermore, we believe this case is a gross overreaction to what was, at most, a minor altercation between teenagers. We move for immediate dismissal. The judge's expression didn't change. Motion denied. Ms. Mendez, you may present your opening statement. Sarah Mendez stood, gathering her notes, but she didn't need them. She'd lived this case for weeks, had sat with Robert Chen as he recounted what happened, had watched this proud veteran's voice crack when describing the humiliation. She looked at the jury, 12 faces representing the community, and began. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about what happens when cruelty meets courage, when privilege meets principle, when someone who has never sacrificed anything encounters someone who sacrificed everything. Her voice carried across the silent courtroom. Sergeant Robert Chen lost his leg in Kandahar while protecting a convoy of civilians from an IED attack. He spent 14 months in recovery. He learned to walk again with a prosthetic. He learned to live with chronic pain. He came home to a country he bled for, and he tried to live a normal life. On the afternoon of July 19th, he went to Riverside Mall to buy a birthday present for his daughter. That's when he encountered Madison Whitmore. Madison examined her nails, barely suppressing a yawn. Sarah continued, her voice hardening. The defendant didn't just insult Sergeant Chen. She didn't just mock his disability. She physically assaulted him, knocked items from his hands, filmed him struggling to retrieve them, and posted that video online with a caption that I won't repeat in this courtroom out of respect for the dignity Sergeant Chen maintains, even when others refuse to grant it to him. The video went viral. Millions watched a decorated war hero being humiliated. And through it all, Madison Whitmore laughed. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. The defense will tell you this was a misunderstanding, teenage thoughtlessness, a momentary lapse. I will show you it was deliberate, calculated cruelty from someone who believed her father's money made her untouchable. I will show you that we are all touchable by justice, or justice means nothing at all. She sat down. The courtroom remained silent. Marcus Thornhill stood, his smile confident. Your Honor, members of the jury, let's be clear about what we're really seeing here. A teenager made a mistake. Was it in poor taste? Perhaps. Was it criminal? Absolutely not. My client is 17 years old. She has her entire future ahead of her. She has been accepted to Yale University. She volunteers at animal shelters. She has a spotless record. The prosecution wants to destroy a young woman's life over what amounts to schoolyard behavior that has been blown wildly out of proportion by social media hysteria. He gestured toward Robert Chen without actually looking at him. No one doubts Sergeant Chen's service. We're grateful for it. But that service doesn't entitle anyone to weaponize the legal system against a child who made an error in judgment. The video in question shows nothing more than an awkward interaction, exaggerated by selective editing and inflammatory commentary. We will prove that Madison never touched Sergeant Chen, never intended harm, and that this entire prosecution is nothing more than performative virtue signaling at the expense of a young woman's future. Judge Monroe's face remained impassive as stone, but something flickered in those gray eyes, something that Marcus Thornhill, in his arrogance, failed to notice. Sarah Mendez called her first witness. The people call Sergeant First Class Robert Chen. The courtroom watched as Robert wheeled himself to the witness stand. The bailiff approached with a Bible, but Robert was already raising his scarred right hand. I solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. His voice was steady, controlled. Years of military discipline had taught him to master emotion, to function under pressure, to maintain composure when chaos erupted around him. Sarah approached him gently, respectfully. Sergeant Chen, can you tell the court about your military service? I served 12 years in the United States Army, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. I was a combat engineer, IED detection and disposal. On my 3rd tour, my unit was escorting civilians out of a contested area when we encountered a complex ambush. An IED detonated near our lead vehicle. I was pulled civilians from the blast radius when a secondary device exploded. I lost my left leg below the knee and sustained severe burns to my right hand and arm. His voice never wavered, but the courtroom leaned forward, hanging on every word. After recovery, I was medically retired. I received a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. I returned to San Diego, where my wife and daughter live. I work part-time as a consultant for veteran services and try to live as normal a life as possible. Sarah nodded. Can you describe what happened on July 19th at Riverside Mall? Robert's jaw tightened slightly, the only visible sign of the emotions he kept locked down. I went to the mall to buy a birthday present for my daughter. She was turning 8. She wanted a specific doll, some character from a movie I can't keep track of. I found it in a toy store and was carrying it along with a few other items toward the checkout. The mall was crowded. I was navigating my wheelchair through the crowd when I heard laughing behind me. What kind of laughing? Mocking. The kind of laughter that makes your skin crawl because you know it's directed at you. I turned and saw 3 teenage girls. The defendant was in the center. He nodded toward Madison, who was now studying her phone under the table, not even pretending to pay attention. She pointed at me and said something to her friends. They laughed harder. I tried to ignore it and kept moving. What happened next? She followed me. She started talking loudly enough for me to hear, making jokes about my wheelchair, about my leg, asking her friends if I'd lost it running away from battle. Her friends seemed uncomfortable, but Madison kept going. She called me half a man and asked if the military gave refunds for defective soldiers. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Monroe's gavel silenced it instantly, but his eyes had narrowed, fixed on Madison Whitmore. Robert continued, his voice still controlled but carrying an undercurrent of pain that no amount of discipline could fully hide. I stopped and turned around. I looked at her directly and said, "I lost my leg serving my country. I'd appreciate it if you'd show some respect." She looked me right in the eyes and said, "Respect? For what? You couldn't even keep your own leg safe." Why would I respect that? Sarah let the silence stretch. Let the jury absorb those words. What happened after she said that? She reached out and knocked the doll from my hands. It fell to the floor along with the other items I was carrying. I leaned down to pick them up, and because of my prosthetic and the angle, it's difficult for me to reach the ground from a seated position. I was struggling, and she pulled out her phone and started filming me. She was laughing and narrating for her social media, saying things like, "Watch this cripple try to function, and this is what happens when you're useless." Her friends tried to pull her away, but she kept filming. Finally, another shopper helped me gather my items, and Madison and her friends left. "Did you report this incident?" "Not immediately. I was humiliated. I just wanted to buy my daughter's present and go home. But that evening, my daughter was crying in her room. Her friends at school had seen the video. It had been posted online, and it was spreading. The comments were vicious. People I'd never met were mocking me, making jokes about my disability, about my service. My daughter asked me why that girl hated me. I didn't have an answer. His voice finally cracked, just slightly, and he paused to steady himself. My 8-year-old daughter shouldn't have to see her father mocked like that. So I went to the police the next morning and filed a report. Sarah returned to her table and retrieved a tablet. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence People's Exhibit A, the video posted by Madison Whitmore. Judge Monroe nodded. The bailiff dimmed the lights, and the video played on a large screen. The courtroom watched in absolute silence as Madison's voice, dripping with contempt, narrated footage of Robert Chen struggling to retrieve his daughter's birthday present from the floor while she laughed. The audio was clear. Every cruel word, every mocking comment, every calculated humiliation. When the lights came back on, several jurors looked horrified. One elderly woman in the front row had tears in her eyes. Madison Whitmore, however, was whispering something to her attorney, completely unbothered. No further questions, Your Honor. Marcus Thornhill rose for cross-examination with the confidence of a man who believed he could spin anything. Sergeant Chen, I appreciate your service truly, but let me ask you, isn't it possible you misinterpreted my client's intentions? Perhaps she was just joking around and you took it more seriously than intended? Robert met his eyes directly. Counselor, I've been shot at by people who wanted to kill me. I've held dying men in my arms. I know the difference between a joke and malice. What your client did was malicious, but you never asked her to stop filming, did you? I was on the floor picking up toys for my daughter's birthday while being mocked by a stranger. No, I didn't think to formally request that she cease documenting my humiliation. A few people in the gallery chuckled, quickly silenced by the judge's look. Thornhill pressed on. Isn't it true that you've received significant media attention from this incident? You've been interviewed. There's been a fundraising campaign in your name. Isn't it possible this is more about publicity than justice? Sarah Mendez shot to her feet. Objection. Argumentative and insulting to the witness. Sustained, Judge Monroe said, his voice carrying a warning edge. Mr. Thornhill, tread carefully. But the damage attempt had been made, and Thornhill, satisfied he'd planted a seed of doubt, sat down. No further questions. Sarah called her next witnesses, the other shoppers who had witnessed the incident, the mall security guard who had reviewed the footage, and finally, a social media expert who testified about the reach and impact of the video. Over 3 million views, thousands of hateful comments, and widespread discussion that had turned Robert Chen into an unwilling viral sensation. Throughout it all, Madison Whitmore showed no emotion, no remorse, no acknowledgement that she'd done anything wrong. When it was the defense's turn, Marcus Thornhill called Madison to the stand. She walked up with her head high, her expression one of practiced innocence. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth with a voice that sounded coached, rehearsed. Thornhill led her through his prepared questions. Madison, in your own words, can you tell us what happened that day? Madison's voice was sweet, almost childlike. I was at the mall with my friends just shopping for summer clothes. We were laughing and having fun. You know, normal teenage stuff. I saw the man in the wheelchair and honestly, I felt bad for him. I didn't mean anything by what I said. I was just trying to be friendly, maybe make him smile. Sometimes I use humor inappropriately. My therapist says it's a coping mechanism. I never meant to hurt anyone. Did you assault Sergeant Chen? Absolutely not. I would never. The doll fell. He dropped it. Maybe because his hands were full, and I tried to help, but he seemed upset, so I backed off. The video was supposed to be just for my friends, showing a funny moment. I had no idea it would go viral. I feel terrible about what happened. She even managed to squeeze out a tear, dabbing at her eye with a tissue her attorney handed her. Sarah Mendez stood for cross-examination, and the temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop. Miss Whitmore, you testified that you were trying to be friendly to Sergeant Chen, correct? Yes, ma'am. And you thought calling him half a man and a defective soldier was friendly. Madison's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of irritation crossing her face. I don't recall saying those exact words. Sarah held up a transcript. We have multiple witnesses who heard you, plus the audio from your own video. Would you like me to play it again? I might have said something like that, but it was taken out of context. I was joking. You were joking when you asked if the military gives refunds for defective soldiers? It was just, I didn't mean it literally. Sarah stepped closer. Miss Whitmore, when Sergeant Chen asked you to show respect, you knocked his daughter's birthday present out of his hands, correct? It was an accident. An accident? You're saying your hand accidentally knocked items from his grip? Yes. And then you accidentally pulled out your phone, accidentally started recording, and accidentally posted it online with captions mocking his disability. All accidents? Madison's composure was cracking. I'm 17, I made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Miss Whitmore, have you apologized to Sergeant Chen at any point in the last 4 months since this incident? Silence. Madison looked at her attorney, who gave a small shake of his head. No, she finally admitted. Have you taken down the video? My attorney told me not to. So the video that has caused Sergeant Chen and his family immense pain, that has been viewed millions of times, that has made his 8-year-old daughter cry, that video is still online because your attorney advised you to keep it posted. Objection. Thornhill was on his feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. Overruled, Judge Monroe said quietly. Answer the question, Miss Whitmore. Madison's face flushed red. Yes, it's still online. Sarah returned to her table and picked up a folder. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence Defense Exhibit B, a series of text messages between Madison Whitmore and her friends sent before, during, and after the incident at the mall. Thornhill jumped up. Objection! Those messages were obtained from publicly posted screenshots on your client's social media account, Sarah interrupted. She posted them herself. Judge Monroe examined the messages. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'll allow it, Sarah read aloud. These are messages from Madison to her friends the night before the incident. Quote, going to the mall tomorrow. Hope I see some freaks to film. My account needs content. The morning of the incident. Mall is full of losers today. This is going to be good. And after the incident, OMG just destroyed some crippled army loser. Video is gold. This is going to blow up. I'm going to be famous. End quote. The courtroom erupted. Judge Monroe's gavel came down hard. Once, twice, 3 times. Order! Order in this court! Madison's face had gone pale, then red, her carefully constructed image shattered. That's not… I didn't mean… You didn't mean what? Sarah's voice cut through. You didn't mean to call him a crippled army loser? You didn't mean to say destroying him would make you famous? Which part didn't you mean, Miss Whitmore? Madison's eyes filled with tears, but these weren't the calculated tears from earlier. These were tears of rage, of humiliation, of someone watching their perfect facade crumble in real time. He's just some nobody. My father is Preston Whitmore. Do you know who that is? Do you know how much money my family has? This is ridiculous. I shouldn't even be here. The courtroom went absolutely silent. Even Thornhill looked horrified, reaching for his client's arm, but Madison yanked it away. I did him a favor by even acknowledging he existed. People like him should be grateful people like me even notice them. He's… That's enough. Judge Monroe's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through Madison's tirade like a blade through silk. The absolute authority in those 2 words froze everyone in place. Miss Whitmore, sit down. Madison, perhaps finally recognizing the depth of the hole she'd dug, sat down, her chest heaving. Judge Monroe looked at the attorneys. Closing arguments. Marcus Thornhill tried to salvage what he could, talking about teenage brains, about social media culture, about how everyone deserves a second chance, but his words landed hollow after what the courtroom had just witnessed. Sarah Mendez stood for the final time. Your Honor, members of the jury, you've seen the evidence. You've heard the testimony. You've watched the defendant reveal exactly who she is. This case was never complicated. A decorated war hero was assaulted, humiliated, and mocked by someone who believed her privilege made her immune to consequences. But that's not how justice works. That's not how America works. Sergeant Chen sacrificed his leg, his health, his peace of mind for a country that promises equal justice under law. Today we prove whether that promise means anything. I trust you'll do what's right. Judge Monroe addressed the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard all the evidence. You will now deliberate on the charges of assault and battery, harassment, and disability discrimination. The bailiff will escort you to the jury room. The wait lasted 47 minutes. When the jury returned, their faces were set, resolved. As the jury reached a verdict, the forewoman stood, a middle-aged black woman who worked as a schoolteacher. "We have, Your Honor. What say you? On the charge of assault and battery, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of harassment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of disability discrimination, we find the defendant guilty." Madison gasped, her face crumbling. Her father looked stunned, already reaching for his phone, probably to call in favors. But Judge Monroe wasn't finished. "Miss Whitmore, please stand." Madison stood on shaking legs, her attorney beside her. Judge Monroe removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly, deliberately. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 60 years of witnessing human nature at its worst and his unwavering commitment to justice at its best. "Miss Whitmore, I've been on this bench for 32 years. I've seen poverty drive people to desperation. I've seen addiction turn good people into criminals. I've seen mental illness, ignorance, and circumstance push individuals toward choices they regret. In many of those cases, I've been able to find compassion, to understand that humans are complex and fallible. But this case is different." He paused, his gray eyes locking onto Madison's. "You didn't act from desperation or ignorance or illness. You acted from pure, calculated cruelty. You saw a man who had sacrificed more than you can comprehend, and you decided his pain was your entertainment. You didn't just mock him privately. You weaponized technology to amplify his humiliation to millions. And when given the chance to show remorse, to demonstrate that somewhere beneath your privilege lies a shred of human decency, you instead revealed the depth of your contempt for anyone you consider beneath you." Preston Whitmore stood up. "Your Honor, if I may, Mr. Whitmore, sit down before I find you in contempt." The judge's voice didn't rise, but the command was absolute. Preston sat. Judge Monroe continued, his attention returning to Madison. "Sergeant Chen didn't ask to be a hero. He didn't seek attention or glory. He simply did his duty, and he paid a price most of us will never understand. He lost part of his body defending the very freedoms you abused to torment him. He came to a mall to buy his daughter a birthday present, an act of love from a father who had already given too much, and you turned it into a spectacle of cruelty." The judge's voice hardened. "You said in your testimony that you're 17, that you made a mistake. Let me be clear. This wasn't a mistake. A mistake is accidental. What you did was intentional, premeditated, and malicious. You are old enough to know right from wrong. You are old enough to be held accountable." He opened a folder before him. "On the charge of assault and battery, I sentence you to 90 days in juvenile detention, to be served immediately. On the charge of harassment, I sentence you to 200 hours of community service, to be completed at a veterans rehabilitation center, where you will see firsthand the courage and dignity you so casually mocked. On the charge of disability discrimination, I order you to write a personal apology to Sergeant Chen and his family, to be reviewed by this court, and to create and fund a scholarship in his name for children of disabled veterans, in the amount of $50,000. Madison's mouth fell open. "50,000, that's not—" "I'm not finished." The judge's voice dropped to a near whisper, somehow more powerful in its quietness. "Furthermore, I'm ordering you to remove the video from all platforms within 24 hours and to issue a public statement acknowledging your actions and apologizing to Sergeant Chen. The statement will be reviewed and approved by this court before publication. Additionally, I am prohibiting you from any social media use for 1 full year following your release from detention." Preston Whitmore was on his feet again. "Your Honor, this is excessive. My daughter has been accepted to Yale." Judge Monroe turned his gaze to the father, and something in that look made Preston Whitmore stop mid-sentence. "Mr. Whitmore, your daughter's actions reflect not just on her character, but on the values she's learned. If Yale wishes to reconsider their admission decision based on her criminal conviction, that is their prerogative, and frankly, their responsibility. The fact that you're more concerned about her college prospects than about the man she victimized tells me exactly where she learned that privilege equals immunity." The courtroom was so silent, you could hear people breathing. "Miss Whitmore," the judge said, "you walked into this courtroom believing your money, your father's influence, and your youth would protect you from consequences. You believed the rules didn't apply to you. You were wrong. In this courtroom, everyone is equal, everyone is accountable, and everyone, regardless of their bank account or their last name, will face justice when they victimize others. He looked at Robert Chen, still sitting in his wheelchair at the plaintiff's table, his scarred hand resting on the armrest, his face composed but his eyes glistening. "Sergeant Chen, on behalf of this court and the community you served, I apologize that you had to endure this experience. Your service deserves honor, not mockery. Your sacrifice deserves respect, not ridicule. I hope this verdict demonstrates that when cruelty meets justice, justice wins." Robert nodded slowly, a single gesture of acknowledgement and gratitude. Judge Monroe returned his attention to Madison. "Bailiff, take Miss Whitmore into custody. She is to begin serving her sentence immediately." He brought his gavel down with finality. Madison's carefully maintained composure shattered completely. She burst into tears, genuine fear finally cracking through her arrogance as two bailiffs approached. "Daddy, do something! This can't be happening! I don't belong in jail with criminals!" Her attorney grabbed her arm, whispering urgently, trying to calm her, but Madison was beyond hearing. As the bailiffs led her away, she turned back to her father, her voice breaking. "Daddy, fix this! You always fix everything!" But Preston Whitmore, perhaps for the first time in his daughter's life, couldn't fix this. He could only watch as she was escorted through the side door that led to the holding cells, her designer dress and perfect hair now just costumes on someone who had finally discovered that consequences exist. The courtroom slowly emptied. Sarah Mendez approached Robert Chen, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" Robert looked up at her, and for the first time since the trial began, he smiled. A small, tired smile. Yeah, I am." As they left the courtroom, passing through the heavy oak doors into the hallway, a small crowd had gathered. Veterans who had come to support one of their own, community members who had followed the case, people who had seen the video and been outraged. They stood in respectful silence as Robert wheeled past, and then, spontaneously, one veteran began to clap, then another, then another. The applause grew, echoing through the marble halls of the courthouse, a thunderous acknowledgement of dignity restored. Robert raised his scarred right hand in a small wave, his eyes bright with unshed tears. His daughter's birthday had been last week. He'd given her the doll finally, after keeping it stored away as evidence. She'd hugged him and told him he was her hero. That moment meant more than any verdict ever could. But this mattered too. This proved that justice still meant something, that sacrifice still mattered, that cruelty would not go unanswered. Later that evening, the news coverage would be widespread. Social media, the same platform that had amplified Madison's cruelty, would now amplify her consequences. The video of her breakdown in court, of Judge Monroe's devastating sentencing remarks, would go as viral as her original mockery. But this time, the comments would be different. This time, people would be sharing not to laugh at suffering but to celebrate justice. Preston Whitmore would hire appeals attorneys, would call in political favors, would try everything his considerable wealth could buy to overturn the verdict. He would fail. Judge Elias Monroe's ruling was thorough, legally sound, and backed by overwhelming evidence. The appeals court would uphold every element of the sentence. Madison would serve her 90 days. The juvenile detention center would not be the nightmare she imagined, but it would be humbling, sharing space with young people who had faced real hardship, who had made mistakes born from circumstances rather than entitlement. Her community service at the Veterans Center would change her more than any other part of her punishment. She would meet men and women who had lost limbs, sight, mobility, peace of mind, and yet carried themselves with more grace than she had ever shown with all her privileges intact. Whether she would truly change remained to be seen. But the system had done its job. The law had applied equally. Justice had been served. Judge Elias Monroe would return to his chambers after the courtroom cleared, would sit in his leather chair surrounded by law books and case files, and would allow himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Another day, another case, another example that, in his courtroom, the only thing that mattered was truth and justice. Privilege bought many things in the world beyond those doors, but inside courtroom 7, it bought nothing at all. The scales had balanced, the arrogant had been humbled, the veteran had been honored, and once again, the promise that all are equal under law had been kept. Justice doesn't always arrive quickly, and it doesn't always arrive perfectly. But when it arrives with the weight of moral authority behind it, when it is delivered by someone who understands that the law exists to protect the vulnerable from the powerful, it arrives with a force that no amount of money or influence can withstand. If you believe that justice should be truly blind to privilege, and that those who sacrifice deserve our respect, not our mockery, show your support by smashing that like button and subscribing to this channel. Let's build a community that stands for accountability over arrogance, for honor over humiliation, for justice over everything. Comment "Justice for All" below and tell us where you're watching from. Let's see how far this message of true justice can reach.